Question, Lord Snape.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, in the right circumstances, open access operations can provide benefits such as improved connectivity and choice for passengers, but they can also increase costs to taxpayers and create additional performance pressures on an already constrained network. Large areas of the network are already operating at full capacity, and additional open access services can exacerbate constraints along the busiest corridors of the network and impact operators' abilities to operate revenue-generative services that would reduce taxpayer subsidy.
My Lords, I'm grateful to the Minister for that response. Could he assure me that any further applications for open access trains will not prejudice the existing train paths on, particularly on the east and west coast main lines, and particularly those train paths reserved for freight trains, if the government is to meet its target of increasing rail freight by 75% by over the next few years? Could I further ask him if he believes that the fact that open access trains enjoy a different charging regime from those companies, including the state-owned companies who run the majority of services, whether that different regime leads to a more profitable situation as far as open access trains are concerned, and whether he will do anything about it.
So my noble friend is correct. Both the East Coast and West Coast main lines are now heavily constrained, and recent applications considered by the Office of Rail and Road, the regulator, under the current arrangements, have declined most of the additional applications for train paths because simply there is no room. And he's also right to suggest that actually we need to leave room for increased freight operations. There's a general consensus that more railway freight is good for the economy and the environment, and it would be right to leave paths for freight expansion. In respect of his question about profitability, so it was recently reported that First Group's open access business achieved a 32% operating profit in the 2024-25 financial year. These profits arise because open access operators don't pay the full cost of accessing the track, nor do they have to meet public service obligations to operate the services most people need. This allows them to offer reduced fares and provide journeys only between the most profitable locations. Currently, Lumo is the only open access operator that contributes towards fixed costs via an infrastructure cost charge, and that leaves taxpayers to fill the shortfalls. The Railways Bill will change the arrangements will propose to change the arrangements for access, and will consider what needs to be done in respect of charging further.
The Secretary of State, the Minister, just said that the ability to grow open access is constrained by the lack of capacity on the network, and yet he says that the government is intending to increase rail freight by 75%. How are both of those true?
I'm surprised that the noble Lord doesn't know the answer to that, as one of the many former Secretaries of State for Transport in the room. But the answer is, of course, that there are protected freight paths on all the main lines, all the main lines which are likely to carry freight, in order that freight operators can both respond to short-term demand measures, which they do frequently, and change trains on a daily and weekly basis, and also have room for expansion. And it is important that they're left to do that. Otherwise, there is no chance of freight expansion, and in fact, the commercial freight businesses would be damaged.
Lords, under the new world of Great British Railways, will the government allow existing open access operators to continue their current routes beyond the current permissions granted by the ORR, even with a new charging regime?
The noble Baroness has a good point. The commitments made in terms the regulator necessarily needs to give a successful open access application sufficient time to recover the significant costs of rolling stock. So many of these arrangements run for at least 10 years, and of course it would not be right at all to curtail those activities because serious investment has been carried out in order to allow them. What happens in the future we can debate in the course of the Railways Bill, but for the moment those open access operations that have tenure or other similar periodicity will continue.
My Lords, I spent 32 years of my career working in the public sector and came to understand the objective was the needs of the customer, value for the taxpayer, protection of the environment, and having regard in general for society in general. Open access, on the other hand, tends to create conflict, encourages gaming the regulator, inhibits evolutionary change. Will the Noble Lord the Minister exercise extreme caution when considering open access bids?
I listened to my noble friend with care and respect because he has significant prior experience in actually running railways, and he is right that we should be careful because we're only dealing with 1% of the passengers when the rest of the network has 99%. We should be careful to allow people to innovate where innovation is a good thing to do and where there's space for it. We should not allow innovation where actually it's not a good thing to do, it costs the taxpayers money and it can't be accommodated on a very constrained network.
Oh, come on.
Disedifying. I think a lot of people would think, listening into this, quite disedifying and perplexing to hear this sort of hate fest against open access services, which are the most popular with commuters and which drive down prices where they exist and give consumers what they're actually looking for. Now, under the government's proposals, the decision about whether open access will be granted for new or continued services will be transferred from an independent regulator to Great British Rail, which is, of course, an interested party as a provider of competing services. Doesn't the attitude expressed by the Noble Lord the Minister show how unfit for that purpose the new Great British Railways is going to be when they start with such an antagonistic disposition?
The Noble Lord's drunk his own Kool-Aid a bit on this because I made it quite clear that there are benefits to be provided. He also needs to do a bit of careful research because there are very few commuters on open access services. Commuting is one of the things that has a high fixed cost and generally doesn't cover the cost of its operations. Open access is successful for people making long distance journeys irregularly, and some of the operators are very good at it. But he also refers to the Future Railways Bill, where we've already made it quite clear that Great British Railways needs to be the body that decides who implements the timetable, because currently there isn't one. It will have to have some rules for access to the railway, which will be developed from the current rules and will be consulted. And if third parties believe that they have been disadvantaged by GBR not following its own rules or doing something in the wrong way, then our proposal will be that they have the ability to appeal to the independent regulator. I think that's perfectly fair, but I also think that it's really, really important that your Lordship's House recognise that nobody is currently in charge of the National Railway timetable except the Secretary of State and me, and outside North Korea that is really not a good circumstance to have.
But further to Lord Tunnicliffe's question, can the Noble Lord the Minister confirm that train operators offer choice for travellers, jobs for those in the railway industry, and direct links to London from stations not served by other operators? So will he condemn the words of Mick Whelan, the General Secretary of ASLEF, who described open access operators as parasites?
Shocking.
I think the railway trade unions are quite capable of speaking for themselves. And he's right. I did say that open access provides benefits such as improved connectivity and choice for passengers. They do provide jobs, though the House might like to note that currently Hull Trains has been in dispute since February with their own drivers, which is a dispute that shows no signs of being resolved and also results in a reduced service for which the operator, Hull Trains, owned by First Group, has no substitute.
The Minister told us that the West Coast Main Line is either out of capacity or will be very shortly. Why has the government acquiesced to the previous administration's curtailment of the HS2 project?
The curtailment of Phase 2A of HS2 was a peremptory decision taken with little thought and, I would suggest, no good information. The result of it is, as the Noble Lord says, that the West Coast Main Line is currently full, as decided independently by the regulator, who declined all of the applications for open access on it. This government has to consider very, very carefully what it now does with the results of this peremptory decision. Cancelling a railway to Manchester in Manchester is a pretty crazy thing to do, but that's what happened. And we will be back in due course to say what our proposition is, having thought about it a good deal more carefully than the last government did.